Hi, this is Zach. Those that have followed my channel for a while probably know that the Bixler 1.1 used to be my go-to plane for FPV before the Mini Talon came along about 5 years ago and took over that sort of mid-range, long endurance, faster flying. But the Bixler 1.1 was my go-to plane for a number of reasons, and one of those was its reliable takeoff and short landing ability. Since I moved over to the Mini Talon and no longer have a Bixler, I've kind of been missing that plane in the collection that is just fun to take to the park and something you can hand over to someone else who's learning. So I decided to try one of these ex-UAV Skysurfers, which are very similar to the Bixler 1.1. The wings are 1400 millimeters compared to 1380, and I think the actual body length is 1 or 2 centimeters shorter than the Bixler 1.1. Now that I've built it up, my comparison between the two bodies, the Bixler 1.1 had a fairly flexible tail boom, which you had to strengthen with a carbon rod if you wanted that extra strength. Whereas what I like about the ex-UAV version of the Skysurfer X8 is the tail boom is actually really rigid. It's got these bulkheads, nice big blocks of foam all the way through the tail, and then if you install the servos for FPV configuration, you end up gluing this extra guide rail along the outside as well, which adds that extra little bit of rigidity. But yeah, that barely flexes at all. It's really good. The motor mount, a little bit different. With the Bixler, you basically had a piece of plywood that was glued in inside, and the trouble with that is there was nothing supporting that piece of plywood. So a heavy landing, the weight of the motor would snap forward and your plywood would snap with it. Whereas this, there's actually a nice block of foam and a couple of pieces of plywood, and there's actually nowhere for the motor to go. So this motor mount is actually more rigid, and it shouldn't cause any issues with bumpy landings. In true ex-UAV fashion, the wings slot on and you simply tighten the nuts and it locks the wings into place. I like that the servos are on the outside. Certainly makes them easy to replace if you need to. I've decided, as you can see, to use the stickers that were intended for the top of the plane underneath so that I've got some visibility because this plane is just going to be a line of sight flyer for me. So what I don't like, there's a couple of things that I've picked up. The main one is, unlike the 1.1, where essentially from the nose all the way through to about here, you've just got one unobstructed cavern that you can configure any way you like, and you know the opening is reasonably big, so those with smaller hands can actually reach in and move things around without having to cut extra access in. Unfortunately, this X8, one of its strengths being, it's quite rigid through the body, it's got all these extra foam spires and bulkheads all the way through it. You can see one there, and the foam just inside here is actually extruding out into the actual fuselage. So while that adds strength, it does mean there's no way you can actually get your hands in there. So it's kind of weird because there's no other access hatches built into this design. So to even connect the motor wires that stop about here to the ESC, which needs to sit inside, there's actually almost no way of getting the ESC down the back and connected to the motor wires. So I've actually had to cut a little access hatch here that I've just taped back in, just so I can reach in and connect things up. You've also got a nice big air inlet at the front, although that's where you're going to be potentially landing in grass and dirt. And the exit ports are both underneath in the middle, as well as joining up with this hole at the top of the motor mount. There's a hole underneath, which allows air to flow through to the motor as well. The weight of this plane built up is, for me, less than 550 grams. So it's a really light build, really quick build. I did everything pretty much in a day, so really looking forward to giving this plane a fly. I thought I'd quickly show you that I've done some extra programming in the radio. Firstly, I've enabled a switch which gives me either flapper-ons or spoiler-ons. And as you can see there, I've got them on a slow up and down as well, and I can just turn that on and off with the switch and then adjust the amount using the dial. No trouble at all. Look at that. flies beautifully. So smooth. Let's try a roll. Oh, just stunning. Love it. Everything about this plane is just so predictable. It's not too noisy with the motor and prop I've got on there. It's a 6x4 3-blader from HQ Prop. First time I've used it, and yeah, looks okay. Not as high thrust as some of the other options out there, but I think it suits this little motor just fine. I've also got a telemetry battery monitor in there hooked up to my radio, so at any time that I'm worried about how much battery I've got, I just flick a little momentary switch on the radio and it tells me.
11.7 volts.
This plane can happily fly along at about 3 amps, and I've measured the wattage to be just over 4 amps, probably 4.1 amps at 50% throttle on this current motor and prop. So at least I know that if I just want to cruise around without drawing much power, 50% throttle's just fine. At 75% throttle is where it finally reaches 10 amps of draw. And from there up to 100%, it sort of gets up to about 18 to 20 amps on a fresh battery. So it's not a hugely power-hungry power system, which is nice. And being able to cruise around at 3 to 4 amps and still maintain altitude just means you can get it up and keep it up there for quite some time if you wanted to. But yeah, there's no tip stalling here. It's just nosing back down, really. There it goes, nose down, and recovers. So pretty drama-free, really. So peaceful flying a glider. It's hard to tell if the plane is actually rising or sinking without a variometer. But I'm enjoying this nonetheless. I haven't powered up for a while. Just circling it around, trying to find any little pockets. I think there's one around here somewhere, because the plane doesn't seem to have dropped much for the last minute or so. Well, I've still got 11 volts. 11.2 volts with the power off. So I could keep flying for another 10 minutes, but I think that'll do for its first battery. Been really happy with this flight. Just push off some speed. Hopefully don't hit the log. Whoop! Alright, we've moved the camera to the plane. Take it for another fly.